From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We are joined, as always, with our super producer, Paul Mission Control Decant. Most importantly, you are here, and that makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. It is the top of the week. This is where our team finally makes the decision to choose one story each out of all the crazy stuff we have read and share it with you, our fellow conspiracy realists. We're talking about crime. We're talking about crypto. We're talking about Wordle, finally, in a fascinating true crime way. Yeah. And we're also diving into very interesting story about Qanon, kind of a depressing story. It's one for the lepidopterist in the crowd. No spoiler, but I never get to use that word. So it's for you, lepidopterist.
Well, we learned two new words today. And when I say we, I mean me. That word, and also the word synecdoche, which I knew from the name of the movie Synecdoche, New York, but I never fully understood what it meant. And Ben, you did a great job of explaining. It's sort of like when one thing becomes a stand-in for a larger thing, kind of, right?
And then what is a lepidopterist?
Lepidopterist, an expert on butterflies. And that is just another example of how incredibly unfair the English language is to people learning it, right? We'll get into that in a second, but I think maybe, Matt, we start today with your story, which involves true crime, involves Wordle. It's an ongoing situation, right? I think this is still this is a story that hasn't yet concluded, but maybe the first way to get into it, can we talk a little bit about Wordle? Have you ever played it, Matt? I know
we
you
can talk about Wordle, as long as you don't want to start by talking about the fact that some unknown intelligence operators within the sphere of the United States are, as of the day we're recording this, saying that Russia might invade Ukraine by Wednesday, which would be last week. Yeah. As you're hearing this, that's okay. We don't have to think about that.
Yeah, my mom said that they closed the American embassy in Kiev.
Yes, they've relocated. The embassy staff that is remaining in country has been relocated to the western part of Ukraine. And we have been talking about this behind the scenes for a while. My contacts in that part of the world are either very scared or very excited, depending on their motivations. I'm trying to be diplomatic here, but also one of the only countries that hasn't issued a leave now order is Ireland. Ireland has weirdly enough said, just keep it to essential travel. And that's a strange flex. But if you, on Twitter, I was talking with some folks about this earlier as well. If you are studying geopolitical tensions, you don't really need to put too much weight on what politicians are saying to their domestic audiences. I mean, that's a part of the calculation, but what you need to look at are the actions. So follow the supply chains, follow the logistics, and ask yourself about timing. Ask in the case of Ukraine and Crimea, we did an episode back in the day that still stands. Like, it actually holds water. And thanks to, I think it was Eric, longtime listener and fellow conspiracy realist Eric, who gave us a kudos for that episode. If you look at what happens with the idea of annexation, I don't know. I wish more people in the West were talking about the Minsk protocols or Minsk agreements. From the Russian perspective, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a hard guarantee that Ukraine will never become a member of NATO, and they're also looking for compliance to the Minsk agreements. But the problem with that is that the government of Ukraine and the government of Russia aka our boy Vlad, don't agree on what the agreement means. It's like,
but Ben, most importantly though, I can't get today's brain teaser, y'all. It's real hard. I'm having a hard.
All right, well that's why Wordle is so important, guys, because this kind of stuff is really happening.
We need something. It is,
and Wordle exists. Lord. So you can, if you don't know what Wordle is, I'm surprised, but that's okay because I didn't know what it was until just a little while ago. But you can head over to New York Times, nytimes.com/games/Wordle.
New York City.
I think it's also /index.
I've been using
.html.
Oh, yep. It already updated because they bought it like in the last less than a month. I mean, it was like a UK URL when I was turned on to it, and then I heard Wordle that the New York Times had bought the thing, so now the URL has magically changed. I just noticed because I've had it open in the same tab ever since I found out about it.
Yes, so it is a game. It is a word guessing game. Mm-hmm. It is delightful. I recommend you try it. You get 6 attempts to name a 5-character word or guess a 5-character word, and it tells you which ones are wrong, which ones are right, which ones are right but not in the right place until you get it right, hopefully. And when you do get it right, it's become a fun thing to share usually on social media or just between text messages or something. The results, how many guesses you got it in. Like, oh man, I got today's.
And you
in
see
3.
it in this little grid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Little squares of which ones were a correct attempt. I think the most important thing to think about with this is it's the same word for everybody, which is where the stroke of genius lies in the whole enterprise. In my opinion.
I would say the big stroke of genius and the reason it struck such a chord with people, the reason New York Times bought it, is because it is self-limiting. It allows you, regardless of who you are, it allows you one puzzle per day.
Exactly.
And a good friend of ours who is a spectacular author, and I think we hang with this guy we'll introduce you to one day, who looks a lot like David Lynch. He's not David Lynch, but he looks a lot like David Lynch. He's super cool. I know we're being by necessity a little bit vague here, but he also he has opinions about Wordle being purchased by the New York Times, and he may strike a chord with some of our fellow Wordle enthusiasts because this guy, this mystery fellow, is of the opinion that since New York Times acquired Wordle, they have changed the guess words, like the words you're trying to guess. They have changed them to more reflect the brand of the New York Times. And he is, on a scale of 1 to not happy, very unhappy about it. I don't, oh gosh, we can't talk about him yet, but you're going to meet him soon enough. And Wordle is just, I think what you're establishing here, Matt, is that Wordle has become a kind of communicative currency for a lot of people, right? Like you might have friends that you don't necessarily catch up with on a regular basis because not everybody hangs out every day like the 5 of us. So you might only be communicating with them by sending that neat little grid so everybody can see that you guessed the correct word on the 3rd try or even the 2nd try. And people have built a ritualization and a regularity through this. And that's where we start to see today's story.
Yes, correct. That's why a lot of people are posting it on social media. That's I would say the standard ritual. For some, it's more of a, communication between one other person or a couple other people, like family or friends. Like, hey, I got today's in 3. And for
don't
the
tell me
purpose,
I'm 2 in and I've only got the first letter. I've only got the first letter, and I'm like, I'm clueless, man. It's really killing me.
Yes, I won't tell you. But for the purposes of today's show, this is the ritual that the subject of the story has with her family. Now, put that to the side here. Remember that Wordle is a ritual for this person and their immediate family. Imagine, if you will, you're lying in bed. It's very late. It's dark everywhere. Your lights are all out except for the ones you keep on during the night so you don't stumble over yourself when you go to the bathroom. You awake all of a sudden, and standing in your room, just above you, and beyond your bed, there is a naked man in his 30s with scissors in his hand. How do you react to that situation immediately upon waking? I don't know how I would react because I've never been in that situation, but I have a feeling the panic would set in very quickly and the fight or flight thing would happen. Well, for the subject of today's story, that is not what happened. She was very cool and collected in her response to this person being in her room at night, who, by the way, is bleeding pretty profusely from his arm where he broke the window in order to gain entry into this person's house. Just unsettling all around. This is the story of Denise Holt, and this is something that really happened to her just a couple of weeks ago. It was a Saturday, and everything seemed to be going fine, and then now she's stuck in this situation. I mentioned that she stayed calm and collected in this situation. Well, she did. This man was apparently very cold, and he got into bed with her, and she just said, "Okay, what do you need? What's going on? What can I do? How can I help? Basically, you're in charge. What do we need to do here?" The man held her hostage for, I believe, 17 to 20 hours, sometime in there, but depending on the reporting that you can see from everything from CBS Local to the Washington Post, to the Independent, everybody's reporting on this right now. Again, I'm bringing you another one of these stories that's everywhere in the news.
And have we mentioned the age of the victim here?
Oh, age of the victim, no, is 80. Denise Holt is an 80-year-old woman. She lives alone. And this is, again, this is an astonishing story. So this man who continued to be naked, who continued to have a weapon because he went into the kitchen and got 2 knives out of the kitchen, then used those essentially to hold this woman hostage. And he was shivering the entire time. He was apparently trying to warm himself up. He took a shower and he made Denise get in the shower with him. He then said he couldn't warm up enough, so he got into the bathtub and made her get in the bathtub with him. According to the story, this isn't a story of sexual abuse. This is mental and physical coercion and abuse of some way, but it's not a story about sexual abuse, at least that what's been reported. He then ended up taking her down to a bathroom, I believe in the basement area, and kept her there, put a chair up against the door and locked her in the bathroom for hours and hours and hours. I think it was, this is what it is, guys. I'm getting the time confused. It was 20 hours in total. 17 hours of that was her locked in the basement bathroom. And think about that. You're 80 years old. You live alone. Someone's just broken into your house randomly. You don't have access to your cell phone. The man went around the house and unplugged the landline phone. How do you alert anyone when you're stuck in the basement bathroom? Imagine that. What do you do?
Well, assuming you're not, that's not a rhetorical question, Matt, then the answer, I would say, goes into basic kind of survival stuff, right? Like prior preparation is more advantageous than luck. So you want predictability, but predictability and prior preparation are things that people usually only appreciate after they should have already prepared. You know what I mean?
For certain. I think many of us never imagined that something like this could actually happen. I guess it's that space between over and under preparation, right? So where do you fall in? And this is a question to you listening right now. Where do you fall into that? But I think especially if you're 80 years old and you live alone, you just don't expect it to happen. But it does. She's stuck in that bathroom. How do you alert anyone? Well, here's the thing. It's an alert by not alerting. It's the lack of an alert, right? Like a dead hand situation. Both of her daughters, who live very, very far away from her, are used to getting a Wordle update from her on a daily basis. And when they both did not receive that, and then they communicated together after not being able to get in touch with her via phone, they called a neighbor who then did a check on the house. They, tried to get anyone's attention in the home. No one responded. He let the daughters know that the vehicle was there that their mother drives. So that was a bit suspicious. So the daughters then, from very far away, called the local police and had them do a wellness check. And that is when Denise, locked in the basement, was able to yell to them and let them know that she is in fact in the home and someone is in the home with her. And that's how she was saved.
It reminds me a lot of one of the basic things for solo exploration. I've mentioned this before. If you're not familiar with the U.S., if you're from outside of that country, then you probably know like New York and Los Angeles, right? And maybe Chicago if you like comedy. But a lot of people aren't fully aware of the scale of wilderness in this country. There's a vast interior that is unmapped to the point where the FBI doesn't even monitor disappearances in national parks. That's a true fact. So if you are going out into the wild on your own, one of the day one things you do is you establish a timeline and you tell people who are going to remain in civilization, like, hey, Matt, Noel, I got a wild hair. I'm going to go explore, the most remote parts of Montana, but don't worry, I will check back in on Saturday. And if I don't check back in on Saturday, send someone. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what this, luckily through serendipity, this person had established a routine, and that routine may well have saved her life.
Absolutely. I think it absolutely did. In that 17 hours that she was stuck in the basement, the man apparently opened the door one time and simply remarked, "Oh, you didn't sleep," and then closed the door again, locked her back in. And meanwhile, I told you that she took a shower and a bath with this guy. He didn't let her dry off and get changed or anything. She was still wet when she was placed into that cold basement shower. And this is in Lincolnwood, Illinois, where it is not warm at all, which, makes you understand why whoever this naked man was that busted into the house was probably freezing, was actually physically freezing. That man, by the way, it's been reported by Chicago CBS station and a couple other places as James H. Davis III, who's 32 years old, facing felony charges.
And likely, wouldn't you say that this was like, I mean, I know you already alluded to it, but someone that will probably end up getting psychiatric, confinement rather than going to prison.
Yes, according to the Washington Post and several other outlets, and the police who responded, who had to tase him through a hole that was cut in a door. He was going through some kind of mental distress. And weirdly enough, to his credit, and according to the victim, he didn't actually harm her physically, but he did exert control
of psychological torment.
Yeah, Lord. It's just, we've seen many of these stories where that situation ends very differently, or maybe even begins very differently, where violence is immediately involved.
It reminds me of an episode of 6 Feet Under, where one of the characters who you've grown to really love is abducted and taken on a nightmarish van ride around Los Angeles. And it's more about the mental abuse than it is physical. There is physical abuse that takes place for sure. But to me, the thing that always made me most terrified by that episode and like really, feeling completely kind of taken advantage of emotionally, in terms of seeing this character that I grown to love being treated this way was all of the, is he going to let him go? Oh, he seems like he's going to, and then he doesn't. And that can really leave a lasting impression, if that happens in real life, like total PTSD, especially for an older woman. I mean, I just can't imagine.
Right. Let's talk in real world terms, because I think there's something valuable that everybody listening today can take away from this story. Mm-hmm. And it is ultimately a dilemma of the role you want predictability to play a part in your personal life. So if you are living alone is awesome, by the way, but everybody who's lived alone has had that moment where they think, oh, if I slip and fall, or if something goes sideways, I could be in a real pickle. Who is going to find me? You know what I mean? We all know those anecdotes of, a person's body being discovered because of the smell in an apartment. And it's a grisly thing to talk about, but it's important to acknowledge because it happens. You can build this sort of protective predictability into your life. But I would say, and I know this applies to some of us listening today, I would say you can also be in situations where you need unpredictability. Like if you're in a hostile or hairy place, or you're trying to escape a domestic violence situation, which is tragic and widespread throughout the world, then you are going to want to do basic tradecraft stuff like alter your everyday routes. You don't go to the same place every day. And if you have to go to the same place, try to vary your time, but try to vary how you get there. That is a real thing. But in this case, for most folks, I would say, at least at this point, for most folks and most of your loved ones, you do want to bake in something that is kind of an accountability thing, a buddy system. You want an accountability buddy. You know what I mean? Like, we're very fortunate here because we are literally like in contact every day. If something happens to like Doc or to mission control, then we're going to know about it pretty quickly. And the same with the three of us, but not everybody has that. So if you have someone in your life who is kind of flying solo, whether for a short thing like a off the grid trip or whether they are living alone, it is important to establish routines of contact just for situations like this. It's not paranoid. It's not over preparation. This person was very, very fortunate. And she's very lucky to have awesome kids like this, awesome neighbors. I myself have instituted ritualized check-ins with several people who are in situations like this. And it can feel like you're being a little paranoid, but it only feels that way so long as nothing bad happens. It's worth the investment. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I yield my time. Anyway, here's Wonderwall.
No, you're right, Ben. The whole point of bringing this up in today's episode is to make that point. Establish some kind of contact, especially if you live alone, just to make sure somebody sends, either a neighbor or a friend or the police to check on you if you are not in contact for any reason. It's a good thing to have. A little backup plan. All right. Well, now we'll all sleep soundly tonight, I'm sure. And with that, we'll hear a word from our sponsors, probably a mattress, hopefully, and we'll be right back with more strange news.
And we're back. And is it part of the drinking game if Noel does a strange news story about cryptocurrency? It probably
no. I think it's just a phase at this point. But I think we all kind of like getting the shout out. So like, if you want to, maybe we could all do an enrichment exercise together and write a list of our things and make the most dangerous drinking game in podcasting. But this is
is that where you hunt a human being as part of a drinking game? The most dangerous drinking game?
The most dangerous drinking game. Yes. Get drunk and go on a manhunt. But I know you're alluding to the crypto aspects of this story, but as longtime listeners know, we all love a good heist. Behind the scenes, we love heist so much that one of the other shows we recently created, get thee to a podcast platform and listen to it now, is called Ridiculous Crime. So if you don't like the exploitative aspects of crime, like the really morbid descriptions of bodies and murders and assaults, but you love hearing about capers and heist, and I'll say it, everybody take a shot. The cartoonish lengths people will go to get on the wrong side of the law. Check out Ridiculous Crime, and just to prove how much we love a heist. Oh man, I'm excited about this.
Well, and also key in what Zara and Elizabeth do on Ridiculous Crime is like, oftentimes these crimes are perpetrated by pretty stupid people who make some pretty boneheaded decisions. And, the jury's still out on this couple we're going to talk about today. sort of not entirely out. Essentially, this couple, Heather Morgan and Ilya Lichtenstein, essentially perpetrated through various means the laundering of one of the largest sums of cryptocurrency ever to be stolen. And we'll get to the specific number of Bitcoin because, as we know, Bitcoin is fluctuates depending on what's going on in the market, and it can fluctuate wildly. So at the time of the publication of this piece on Motherboard by Tim Marchman, Joseph Cox, Jordan Pearson, Jason Kobler, and Lorenzo Franceschi Bicchiare. Bicchiare, I think that's right. Serious team effort on this one. It's a very, very good article. The amount in question was roughly $5 billion. So it's been reported different amounts, different places, depending on, the current price of Bitcoin. But the point is, these two people, they stand accused of a serious crime. Their bails have been set in the millions of dollars. And it is not looking good for them. But to Ben's point about the kind of comedic aspect of this, and tying it into kind of like boneheaded capers, these two folks are not exactly the type you would think would be responsible for such a massive heist. Heather in particular. Heather Morgan is sort of a self-styled internet meme, like influencer, comedian. She's been described, it's self-described usually, as a surrealist artist, a cringe rapper. She goes by the handle RazzleCon.
No, I know this is.
And she justifies that name saying that she's like Genghis Khan but has more pizzazz, hence RazzleCon.
Get it?
You talking about Turkish
cute, right?
Martha Stewart?
Turkish Martha Stewart. Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think. She's got, she came out with a song recently called Gilfalicious, which is a rap song talking about wanting to become a grandma I'd like to fill in the blanks with.
Okay. So that wouldn't that be
to play Wordle with
Gilf ETB, a Gilfid, grandma I'd like to fill in the blanks with.
Oh, don't guys, don't fill in the blanks, please.
Let's not.
We're a family show. We're a family show. And also, real quick, that's not to shame anybody's creative endeavors. We're not talking about this person as a musician, right? If you have a creative urge, do it for yourself. Don't worry about what other people think of you. We believe in you. If you make music or write stories, we'd love to hear them. We encourage creative expression. Just maybe not.
Of course we do.
Heist. Yeah.
We do. And and when you look at like a lot of her accounts have been kind of stricken from the internet after all this stuff. I mean, I imagine she did that herself because that's usually how things get stricken from the internet. It's not like, you can just have someone's presence erased by a third party. I imagine when the heat started, getting on, as they say, she probably went through and maybe deleted some of these, videos, even though it's interesting because it's very clear that she wanted to be very famous. And now she's getting her wish. She, let's see, I'm trying to think of some other examples. Like, what? Let's just play a clip from a RazzleCon track called Versace Bedouin.
RazzleCon, the Versace Bedouin. Come real far, but don't know where I'm heading. Mother crocodile of Wall Street. Silver on my fingers and boots on my feet. Always be a goat, not a damn sheep. Email me a message at the beep.
Yeah, there's that. Again, no shade on anyone trying to express themselves creatively, but there is good rap and then there's bad rap, and this is pretty bad. And it's not. I don't quite get the joke. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how self-aware it is my issue. Like, if you're doing a Tim and Eric type bit and it's sort of like you're doing a character that's like bad at something, but you're leaning into it so hard that is the joke, or like one of those Shaggy Dog jokes that they do on Family Guy where it's like, Peter, making a sound for 5 minutes because his knee hurts. Like, that's committing to a bit. And I get that. And that can be funny if used correctly. This to me just seems like someone who really thinks that they're the and like, putting it all out there. And it's just kind of, it's not good. It's not good. Some of the responses to the now that they've obviously they're getting a big name for not what she wanted. Some of the responses on YouTube to the video: the only crime here is her quote rapping, end quote. Phew, I was scared that the world had lost this gem forever. Somebody had reposted this recently. This right here is the genius behind the world's biggest heist. Bitfinex got taken for 71 mil, now 4.5 bill, by Razzle Dazzle. Please tell me she is just the fall guy. Ahaha. Interesting point. Just the moron innocent framed by the real mastermind. Next, we'll be hearing Satoshi Nakamoto directed this video. Yeah, it's very cute. So you heard the name Bitfinex. Bitfinex is an exchange. You'll recall back in the day, one of the OG biggest crypto heists was from an exchange called Mt. Gox, which got taken down by hackers. And usually when something like this happens, the parties responsible never get caught because they do a really good job of, hiding their identity. And while Razzle Khan and her husband did do some things to help hide their identity, they did a really bad job of it. And it basically just kind of caused the investigators looking into the case to have to go through a few, loopholes to find their true identity. Again, we've talked about this off mic, and this is such a crazy and developing story. I mean, this feels like the kind of thing like the, Firefest kind of deal, where it's just drawing attention to such a rotten core of influencer culture and all of this weird materialism. I think that's why I'm fascinated by the Bitcoin stuff and the crypto stuff and NFTs, because it really is just kind of shining a light on how far, afield things have gone in terms of our culture and what is and is not acceptable, and just the weird, gross levels of indulgence and absurd wealth with no direction. You know what I mean? And I think this is gonna be that kind of story, and I bet you we'll have competing documentaries about this as well. But before that happens, we will have a Stuff They Don't Want You to Know episode about it, I'm sure. But so they did do some things they funneled some of it into PlayStation bucks and into Walmart gift cards and gift cards for hotels.com and some other things. And then a lot of the money just sat in an account. And again, this is the Bitfinex was the exchange that was, knocked over. And essentially the implication is that they were laundering money for somebody else, but we don't know and may never know who those other people, those other parties are. And now Liechtenstein and Morgan are in custody waiting for a hearing. Their attorneys haven't responded with any, comments on the story. It is the largest single seizure, according to the Washington Post, of funds in Justice Department history.
So far.
So far. And by the way, you mentioned what do we say? Versace Bedouin. What was the other one? The Turkish Martha Stewart. One of the other honorifics that Morgan gave to herself was the Crocodile of Wall Street. And she does have some bona fides to back that up. I mean, she went to business school and has, lectured pretty extensively on kind of culture jamming, finance kind of stuff, And her husband as well described, her partner, I'm not quite sure if they're married or not, describes himself as a tech entrepreneur, explorer, and occasional magician, while Morgan takes it even further and describes herself as author, raconteur, genius, motivational speaker, one of those kind of deals where you really say, oh, wow, this person really thinks quite a lot of themselves. And she is a smart person. She's got some friends that have commented on her after this story blew up and everyone's like, wow, I had no idea. A friend of hers,
important point.
Yeah.
Being intelligent does not make you necessarily a good person any more than being
100%.
funny necessarily makes you a good person. But you can respect intelligence and acknowledge it without applying, a moral value to it. I'm a little torn on this one because I don't like, shaming anyone's creativity. And there is a certain amount of creativity to a good heist, right? That's why we talk about them so much. But this is definitely crime. And Noel, could you so they got caught in the classic mistake that government level conspirators make. They didn't get necessarily caught just for the crime. The breakthrough in the case was them trying to cover it up. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct. And again, we don't have all of the details for this. At the time of the theft, by the way, the amount of Bitcoin that was stolen from Bitfinex was worth $71 million. But now it's appreciated so much over the years, the total value. Again, in this article, it's saying 4.5 billion, excuse me. Then there's others that say 3.6 billion. Federal officials say they seized 94,000 stolen Bitcoins with an estimated value of 3.6 billion. But that they stole more than that. They only recovered 3.6. So that's the discrepancy in the numbers, in addition to the fact that, the value changes depending on when the reporting takes place. So, again, largest single seizure of funds in the history of the Justice Department. And certainly one of the most high-profile prosecutions ever to emerge from a new digital division, I guess, or at the very least a new task force that's designed specifically to investigate crypto crimes. And Deputy Attorney General Lisa O. Monaco had this to say: cryptocurrency is not a safe haven for criminals, and that this heist was perpetrated, or this laundering effort was perpetrated by Liechtenstein and Morgan, trying to obscure these transactions through a labyrinth of cryptocurrency exchanges. And when I say exchanges, I mean trading them and moving them around. Again, a lot of the stuff is over my head, and a lot of the stuff is not even something that we know about yet. But Bitfinex had actually offered a reward, potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars, for information leading to the folks who stole these funds. And we're not sure if that came into play in any way in this, finding out who was at the center of this. But it's very, very interesting. And again, I think we should probably leave it here and really dig deep into the background of these two. And if there is the potential, as that YouTube commenter said, and as many sources that I've read on this about suggest, these two might have been patsies to some degree. Certainly possible, because they apparently, there's a video. Again, I know that she had a certain performance art bent to this weird rap persona and to a lot of the stuff. There's a video of Morgan eating cat food and for fun, I guess, and for art. And also, she compared herself to folks like Bukowski and Hunter S. Thompson and other kind of weirdo outsider artists and writers. So she definitely was into weird stuff, which I think we all are. The question is in the execution. And again, I'm with you, Ben. I'm not trying to shut down anybody's creativity, but it does strike me as I don't know, the guys I always reference to my dudes over at Internet Today, the YouTube channel, they made the point that what a weird place to try to pull off this level of money laundering. Don't people usually move to Monaco or something to do things like this? Living in one of the most heavily financially regulated states and cities in the world, New York City, and trying to pull this off pretty flagrantly, it seems like a pretty boneheaded move. So we'll see what other information comes to light that whether these folks were in fact steamrolled by a hidden hand. I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility. Let's say.
I would just say the surprising thing is exactly what you just mentioned there, Noel. The size of this heist, the quickness and accuracy in which it was pulled off, and then the seeming ineptitude from the people who pulled it off when it comes to doing a criminal act. Exactly what you're talking about. It just it's very, very strange story. It should be noted that today, as we record this episode, Valentine's Day, the couple is in court, I think, or it was in court earlier today in New York.
Love it.
So we'll see.
Valentine's court.
And last thing, I sort of indicated this before. They didn't like go on some kind of mad spending spree either, which is interesting. I mean, there's photographs of their apartment, which was rented, and it was like littered with like cat toys, and they had like books that were hollowed out that I think, how we've talked about like hot wallets and cold wallets, or where like you can have a wallet with Bitcoin on it that is not connected to the internet. I think that's what was in these hollowed out books. Maybe they had like drives with the stolen goods on it, the stolen soft goods that were like hidden inside of these books. I think I'm not 100% sure about that. But they didn't buy real estate. They didn't do any crazy drug lordy type things. They apparently only spent it on gold. Some on gold. They don't have an exact number of how much they spent. NFTs, and also Walmart gift cards, Uber gift cards, Hotels.com gift cards, and PlayStation bucks.
That makes sense. Proxies. I'm still stuck on the idea of Valentine's Court. And you know what? I'm going to call it. You're all guilty of being loved.
Exactly. I mean, one would hope, and I sure hope their relationship weathers this this particular hiccup. They seem to like they maybe love each other very much, but who's to say? We will find out more soon. I want to know more about these people. Liechtenstein, there's really precious little about him. All the reporting seems to focus on Morgan because she's such a character.
He's a part-time magician, right?
He did say that. Yeah, that's at the end of his like LinkedIn profile or something. Part-time magician. I love that. I love magic. I love sleight of hand. There's a different kind of sleight of hand that they pulled off, though, isn't it? Digital. So let's take a quick break and hear from a sponsor, and then we'll come back with one more piece of strange news.
And we have returned not just to today's show, but to a larger conversation. So much stuff happened over the past few years that you shouldn't beat yourself up if you're not able to keep track of all of it. But it appears in the world of QAnon, there are still some optimists who said, forget the pizza gators. We should go after the lepidopterist. Let me not accidentally freestyle here. Although I am technically quite good at it. Today's final segment is about a weird QAnon thing. So as we mentioned at the very top, lepidopterist is just a fancy word for individuals who study the fancy flying insects, the butterflies, the moths, and what have you. They're not the type of folks that you would associate with vast deep state conspiracies unless you have been taken in by the beliefs of QAnon. And we've talked about QAnon in depth. As a matter of fact, full disclosure, we received some virulent feedback, typically by people who were too afraid to talk to us directly. When we busted some QAnon myths, what they did instead was they gathered in some far right corners of the internet and then gave us bad reviews, which is fine. That's what the review system exists for. I personally would have respected it more if they had the chutzpah to write to us directly, but they didn't because we're correct. So let me just air my beef there real quick. One of the big things, just to catch everybody up, one of the big things in the agglomeration of QAnon conspiracy thought was the idea that the deep state, and something like the deep state does exist, but the idea that the deep state was involved in satanic-themed occult activities to engage in mass abuse of children. So it's not a very original thought. It has its roots in like blood libel and anti-Semitism. It has its roots in satanic panics. It has its roots in earlier theories, and it just sort of got spun out into a like quote unquote new thing. The same way that Taco Bell will figure out a different way to rearrange the same ingredients, and they're like, boom, now we've got what's a good example? A chalupa, right? Chalupa, that's a thing still?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
What is it? What is just like it's like a thick, soft taco kind of, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not bad. Not bad. So it's no quesadilla, but here's what happened. So Pizzagate was a term that got thrown around quite often in recent years. And the idea of this belief that went viral during the 2016 election was based on the hacked emails of a guy named John Podesta, who at the time was working for a politician here in the U.S., Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, former presidential candidate. WikiLeaks published his emails, and people read into them in great detail and sort of extrapolated a lot of stuff. They fell victim to the human need for pattern recognition. And what they concluded is that these emails were sending coded messages. And the coded messages were referring to abuse of children. This culminated in the owners of a place called Comet Pizza, which I don't think the three of us have ever visited. The owners of this place were harassed to the point where people had shown up there with firearms. And in their minds, it's very important not to necessarily vilify these people. In their minds, they were trying to correct a great injustice. They were trying to save the children. Just powerful motivation. It just happens that in this case, they were incorrect. Comet Pizza did not, in fact, function as a hub of trafficking of any sort. I mean, I guess you could say they traffic pizza pie, right? Maybe
they traffic that cheese.
Yeah. They are definitely deep with big cheese. The big cheese conspiracy is real. The Pizzagate one is easily debunked. Anyway, so like a lot of cultish belief systems, the QAnon thing, which was not monolithic, right? The QAnon thing had baked in some expiration dates, right? And we do have a deep dive on this, and it is worth your time if you're not familiar with the entirety of the story and the context. But, you know, just like an end of days cult, the milestones they were waiting for never came to be. And every time one of those milestones did not turn out to be true, the predictions didn't hold water, then the goalpost got moved. Because if you want to control people in a cult-ish or cultic environment, what you do is continually move those goalposts. It's always on to the next thing. And that's what happened here. Back to Lepidopterist. There is a place that most of us have never visited and probably never heard about in Mission, Texas. It is called the National Butterfly Center. It is a nonprofit. It is so incredibly innocuous. It's a project of the North American Butterfly Association. What I'm saying is Spectre or Cobra, these folks are not. They're just super, super duper into butterflies and the role they play in ecology. And, you know, butterflies are pretty to look at, even if you're partially colorblind like me. But it got targeted recently by folks who still subscribe to QAnon. And they said this center is like Comet Pizza, a hub of trafficking. The goalpost is moved. Now we found the real one. It was the butterflies the entire time. And I would advance to you, I think, Matt, this is probably something on your mind as well. I would advance to you that part of this reasoning is based on the concept of Project Monarch, which is in conspiracy lore, it is the belief that the U.S. government and private powerful interests had engaged in mind control through child abuse and just successfully covered it up, despite the fact that there are numerous people that publicly claiming that they were part of this, that they were victimized by this program. So that got transmogrified. It got adapted into the idea, right? Like they're monarch butterflies. So why not? Let's just Charlie Day some red string, right? Between these two ideas.
There are definitely advertisements and signage for the National Butterfly Center in Texas that feature a giant monarch.
Exactly. And so this caught fire. with proponents of various QAnon theories. And just like the case of Comet, things that could have existed as fun thought experiments in forums had real world consequences. As we are recording now, the National Butterfly Center there in Mission, Texas, had to close down because there was an escalating harassment pattern that included death threats, that included physical trespassing. If you want to check out the Butterfly Center's response, I would point you to Mariana Trevino Wright. She's the executive director of this center, and she has her views of when this started. She blames Steve Bannon, actually, or she says the harassment started way back in 2019. It just wasn't making the news because, let's be honest, even though butterflies and moths are important to the world's ecology, relatively few people wake up thinking about them, right? They don't make news. So Wright says that in 2019, Steve Bannon's fundraising org, We Build the Wall, decided to start a project in the same town, in Mission, Texas, and they tried to buy land adjacent to the Butterfly Center. And Wright is of the belief, as far as I understand, that this organization started building a smear campaign against them to bolster fundraising. They were not just accused of being a human trafficking front, they were accused of being a front for cartels. And this was a asymmetric assault. This was an information war, as well as a series of physical incidents. They also, it's so weird, you guys, because it also goes down into just the kind of petty complaints that you would see on neighborhood social forums like Nextdoor, if anybody is familiar with Nextdoor. These hapless lepidopterists who want nothing more than to learn more about butterflies and to make people more aware of the role these insects play in the natural world. These folks were astounded when they saw that their legal disputes were leading to a hate campaign. There were folks who were like cutting down trees on their property, mowing down their brush. And this was sort of like the first foray. Wright says I'm just going to call them the Butterfly Gang, kind of like Apple Dumpling Gang. I think it's good. I'm getting some nods on there. Okay. So the Butterfly Gang said, we found these strangers on our land and we said, who are you? What are you doing? And they said, the government sent us to clear this land for the border wall, which was not true, unless you think the government was this fundraising organization, which, to be clear, it's not. So ultimately,
who knows at this point, Ben? Could be anything.
Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? There is a great Vonnegut story, I think it's Vonnegut, about how the world is secretly run by a conclave of the smartest people on the planet, just playing arbitrary games of chance. That may well be the case. You know what I mean? Anyway, so they take this to court. Their lawsuit gets dismissed. At this time, then President Trump declares a state of emergency, and Wright says this state of emergency is declared so that the administration can take funds and build a border wall. As you will recall, especially if you live in the U.S., that was one of the key platforms of that presidential campaign. And that's something the administration really stuck to its guns on, the idea of building physical barriers between Mexico and the U.S. So they eventually have had enough of this. You can't put these lepidopterists in danger because people have been radicalized online. So the board of directors says, we're going to suspend operations. We're going to close for the safety of our staff. These threats have done what COVID could not, and they have shut us down. They did say, at least Wright says, that local law enforcement has been supportive, so they're not ignoring the problem. But right now, they don't know how long the Butterfly Center is going to be closed. And I keep going back to the QAnon episode we did and some of the segments we did and some of the conversation and interviews that I have had with people on either side of that belief system. And the issue here, I think one of the takeaways here is simply this. If you are subscribed to a set of beliefs that does not accept healthy skepticism, that does not accept critical thought, and that perhaps most importantly, always moves the goalpost of prediction and order of operations, then you need to have a very serious, in the South, they would call it a come to Jesus moment. You need to have a very serious come to Jesus moment with yourself about what the ultimate end game is and how you figure into it. And why does it seem like there's jam yesterday, jam tomorrow, but never, ever jam today? And I don't know. Don't beat up nerds. I'm super biased. We're nerds. Guys, we're nerds, right? We've all accepted that.
Have you guys ever been targeted for your nerddom? I think that would feel really invasive and horrible.
I have.
I don't know that I have specifically in that way, but I know that I would feel really victimized.
I'm a nerd that can fight,
Fair.
Yep. I was just going to bring up, try playing Magic the Gathering in your middle school lunchroom and see what happens. I want to read you guys a review that I found on maps.google.com when you find the Butterfly Center there in Mission. This is from J.E. J.E. states, I saw 8 butterflies in total. While we were there, we could hear gunshots in the near distance. The drive-through part was horrible. On the upside, the 2 staff I encountered were friendly.
Okay. Well, yeah, what do you, of course, Lepidopterus.
Right?
So I mean, the implication is that this is being used as a haven for nefarious activity, or is there something implicating the butterflies themselves? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I'm speculating that this is based on taking the earlier folklore about Project Monarch. And we should do an episode on Project Monarch. It is a fascinating thing to unpack. Also, whenever we're talking about victimization of the vulnerable, it is crucial for us to point out that large-scale abuse operations have occurred. Okay, Epstein was real. That whole thing actually happened. Prince Andrew is never going to go to jail because the aristocrats drew the line at that level of accountability. And the Dutroux affair in Belgium, also real. Pizzagate, not real, but things like this have happened. Also, why did the UK shut down the investigations into things like Operation U-Tree and that creepy Jimmy Savile character? Like these things are real, but the butterfly people are not part of it. They're like clearly not involved. And sadly, this also gets support from people in power, from some politicians domestically. And it's always phrased in like a I'm just saying kind of way, or the rhetorical device where you phrase something as a question to dodge accountability for the beliefs that you are attempting to propagate, often as a bad faith actor. I think it's important to bring this up because this is an opportunity for people to exercise some empathy, exercise some humanity. I've said it before, and I will say it again. Most people are incredibly intelligent if they are given the opportunity to consider all of the facts and all of the context. And right now, in the world of ubiquitous information, there's a great deal of time and energy being spent on disincentivizing people from learning all of the facts. I think we will revisit QAnon in a future episode, and the stuff that we find might surprise you. It won't be entirely a hit piece because we rarely do things that are entirely hit pieces. Those are maybe fun to do and they feel like very self-righteous, but they also often miss accuracy and valid points. So that is where we are going to call it today. We hope you enjoyed this week's strange news. What's your take on Wordle? What's the biggest heist you know of? Again, as always, the clarion call. Feel free to send us the fruits of your creative endeavors. We love hearing about people's creative expressions. And you know what? If we are wrong about the Butterfly Center, if for some reason the National Butterfly Center there in Mission, Texas, is indeed part of some insidious trafficking hub, then let us know and back up those claims with some proof, because that is the one thing that QAnon consistently fails to do. We can't wait to hear from you. We try to be easy to find online.
Hey, tell us how you feel on the internet. You can find us under the handle Conspiracy Stuff. We are at Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, where we also have a Facebook group called Here's Where It Gets Crazy. If you want to find us on Instagram, you can hit us up at Conspiracy Stuff Show. But there's more. You can do it in more of like an analog way, if you wish, can't you?
Yes, if you don't like social media, but you still like your phone and you like to talk, call 1-833-STDWYTK. Please give yourself a really cool nickname. We would appreciate it. We think it's fun. You've got 3 minutes. Say whatever you'd like. Please include whether or not you give us permission to use your voice and message on the air. If you've got more to say than can fit in that 3 minutes, instead consider sending us an email. We are
conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.